Hello everyone, back to you to the third winter 2017-18 update from theGWV.com. So we've done two updates so far, and pretty interesting updates have been as well, I think. This is the third update, and we're going to get various things together again, as always, with winter updates. So we're going to be looking at Arctic sea ice extent. We're going to be looking at Siberian snow cover. We'll look at solar activity. Been some interesting developments there in the past week. We'll look at the oceans, and we're going to specifically be focusing on ENSO for this third update. So I'll get on with it for you in a moment. But before I get on with that, just say it's going to be quite a long video, so if you can't watch it all in one go, don't worry, it will be kept at website indefinitely. I'm going to place it on the winter updates and forecast page later on today with an extensive written report. Probably be around 6-7 o'clock this evening. I'm always a little bit late with it, but I will get it posted for you later on today. There'll be an extensive written report as well, so you can't watch the video all in one go. You can come back and watch it on winter updates and forecast page whenever you want. And also, of course, there'll be that written post to look at as well. Quite a big day at the website day, because later on we'll have our interpretation of the latest ECMWF seasonal model update. That's covering the winter period as well. So a bit of a winter special for you at the website today. Going to be quite a long video as I say this, so I'll get a cup of chair and a cup of tea, maybe some snacks, because we're going to be here for a little while. There's quite a lot to discuss again for this third update. And without further ado, I think we better get on with it for you. So we're going to start off with Arctic sea ice extent for this third update, because we have, important news, we have reached the minimum of Arctic sea ice loss for this particular melt season. Now, you probably can't really make it out on this chart. This is where we are right now in terms of the melt season of 2017. So you notice we start up here with the melt season back around the spring, and through the summer we decline downwards and we bottom out around here. In fact, we did bottom out, I think, on the 9th of September, and very gradually now we will increase Arctic sea ice as we refreeze the Arctic for the long and cold Arctic winter. You'll see we are well below trend. We've spoken about this in the first couple of updates. So that's the trend, that thick grey line just there. And we're very much under that. So it has been another really big melt season. I'm going to pull this out and put some other years in. So let's first of all have a look at the death spiral year. So we're going to have a look at 2012. First of all, that's the year we had the so-called death spiral. You can see we haven't had a death spiral. So through the early part of the melt season, we was trending very much with that green dash line, trending very much with 2012, but around here back in the summer we broke away from 2012, and so 2012 did that. It had the very dramatic loss of Arctic sea ice, whereas for 2017 we're up here, so we don't reach the depths of 2012, but nevertheless you see we are well under the long-term trend, so we can say that we have had another very big melt season. Let's pull this out just a little bit more and start comparing with some other years. So remember that our year, this year 2017, is that green line. Unfortunately, it's rather pale, so it's a bit difficult to make it out. But we're going to have a look at the last 10 years. So let's have a look at 2007 first of all. And actually 2007 was under, with that thick blue line, under 2017. So we haven't had quite the melt season of 2007. Let's put in 2008. Very much on a par with 2008. That red line, blue line are virtually with one another, so very close to the melt season of 2008. We're under 2009, which is that darker blue line just there, Very much on a par with 2010, a little bit under 2010, but not much in it. 2011, I think that comes out under this year as well, so we're above 2011. We know 2012 was the death spiral down here. We haven't reached the depths of that. 2013, we are under 2013. It's getting a little bit harder to make it all out now, but 2013 is that reddish coloured line just there. So we're under that, had a bigger melt season in 2013 and also 2014. Those years were slightly better, that yellow line there above where we are right now. So bigger melt season this year in 2013 and 2014. All of these, of course, well under, these years I should say, well under that grey line. So coming out significantly under trend, whichever year we pick, but it's just slight differences really. So 2015, the next year, I think we're on a par very closely to 2015, and then we've got last year 2016, and I think we're a little bit above last year. Actually, don't have quite the melt season that we had in 2016, but actually there isn't much in it really between sort of these years, which is sort of 2007, 2016 just there, and then the slightly better years, which is 2013, 2014 up here. There's not a huge amount in it. So all of these years are big melt season years, just slight differences between them, but the main thing is that we didn't get another death spiral. In 2012 there was a lot of expectation that we would continue to see death spiral years. We haven't had one now for a little while, so I suppose that's good news in a way, but of course the main point is that for our melt season, well under the long-term trend, and there's no sign really of a recovery in Arctic sea ice back to trend anyway anytime soon. So when we come to do theGWV.com forecast on the 3rd of December, of course all these winter updates are building up towards the theGWV.com winter 2017-18 forecast that will be released on the 3rd of December. So when we come to do that, we'll have this now in the can. We won't look at this again because we know roughly where the melt season was for 2017. It has been another big melt season, so that'll be factored into winter forecast. A little bit above couple of years like 2007 and 2011, but not a death spiral such as we had in 2012, but well under trend. And we'll factor that into the winter forecast when we do it on the 3rd of December. Let's stick with the Arctic and have a look at how things are panning out in terms of Arctic sea ice and Siberian snow cover from the National Ice Institute website. So this is showing us how much ice we have in the Arctic, this yellow area just there. We won't dwell on that anymore because we've just looked at that really, but this blue area is where we have lost Arctic sea ice. All of this, of course, let's change the colour, all of this is going to fill up with yellow over the coming few weeks and months. All of that will fill up with ice in the coming season. But looking at what's happening in terms of Siberian snow cover, so we have seen a little bit of a gain actually over the past week in terms of Siberian snow cover here in the eastern part of Siberia. A few patches appearing just there. That's quite early to be seeing that kind of level of snow, and we'll actually have a look and see how that compares with the past 10 years. I won't go any further back than 2007 for this update. When we get into October and we get into the main sort of Siberian snow cover phase of the winter updates, that's always through October, we'll be able to go further back than 2007. We'll go right way back, I think, to 1998. But for this update, I'm only going to go as far back as 2007. So this was the situation on the 15th of September 2007 in terms of Siberian snow cover, and you can see that there were a few patches there. Let's compare to this year. I think we probably have a little bit more actually this year than we did at this point in 2007. 2008, what about that? So probably on a par with 2008 actually in terms of total snow cover, but in slightly different areas. But I think overall quite close in terms of total coverage to 2008 at this point. We move through, let's carry on and go through, that's gone back to 2007, so let's carry on and go through to 2009. I think we're above 2009, we've got more snow cover than at this point in 2009. 2010 next, I think again on a par really with 2010 for 2017, maybe even a little bit more if anything. 2011, and let's compare 2017 2011, so probably very closely matched, maybe a little bit more actually at this point in 2011. 2012 next, and I think we are doing better than at this point in 2012. That took a long time to get going, the snow cover season of 2012. This all becomes much more important in October, I've got to say. 2013, probably close to 2013. 2014, probably quite close to that, but in slightly different areas. 2015, again, probably quite close in terms of total coverage, but in different areas again. And then 2016, last year, I think we are actually doing better than at this point in 2016, this point last year, for snow cover. Now, this level of snow cover doesn't mean anything, really. It's just a slightly earlier than normal start. But, of course, there's not enough coverage there to make any difference to anything. As we get through into October, that is when all of this is going to fill up with snow, and the snow line will, week by week, if everything works as it should do, start to advance westwards across the Siberian plain. So that's going to be much more impactful as we get through into October. That's when we'll really be focusing on that. Right, we're going to deal with solar activity next. So this is the solar disk on our side of this today from solarham.net, and we have seen a bit of a crash in sunspot and solar activity. So we've got one sunspot region just there, right in the centre of the solar disk on our side of the disk. But now solar activity is officially down to very low levels, and the forecast at Solarham is to keep things at very low levels for at least the next couple of days. Let's have a look at the GWV's winter update solar activity tracker, which our good friend James at Creel has just updated for us. In fact, you're going to see a few charts from James today dealing with solar activity. So as ever, a big thank you to James for supplying us with these charts. Now, we know what happened in the second update. We had that huge ramp up in activity that you can see with this thick orange line shooting up here, and also the thick pink line as well. That's solar flux, and the orange line is sunspot number. So a very dramatic ramp up at the start of September in solar activity was enough to really lift up these trend lines, the thick green and the thick red lines. They shoot up above any point really going back to November last year. In fact, James tells me, I think that you have to go right back to the start of 2016, February 2016, to find a period of solar activity sunspots that was as active as this. But you can see what's happened since the second update. That's where we left off, really, with the second update, just beginning to ease off a little bit, but still at a very high level. You can see what's happened over the past week, and obviously we've had a very big crash in sunspot numbers. The orange line has plunged down to a very minimal level of sunspot activity, and now that means the pink line, which is solar flux again, that's trending downwards, and our trend lines, which are the green and red lines, they are beginning to trend downwards as well. Everything heading south in terms of solar activity, which of course you'd expect, because we are running very rapidly towards solar minimum, which will reach in about 18 months. But the surprise really was to get such a big ramp up in activity so late in the season. Or was it a surprise? Well, James has been looking into this for us. So the first chart I'm going to show you is solar cycle number 24 from start to right now, just to put things in context in terms of solar activity. So this is bringing us up to date on the 1st of September, where you can see that we lift up with sunspot solar activity through this early part of the solar cycle. Then we get this very weak solar minimum just here, and then we get this crash, or drop down, really. It's not a crash, it's a drop down back towards solar minimum. We know this period was a very weak solar maximum, to say the least. It was a very slow, very delayed sort of lift up in solar activity. Well, this is where we are up to, I think this takes up to the 1st of September, so we're just here, and you can see what's going on at the moment. We are at quite a low level of solar activity overall, so we're on a par with where we was back at in the early part of the sunspot cycle, which is sort of 2010, 2011. But we are continuing to get spikes upwards. So whilst the trend is still moving down, you can see that by the trend line here, that is still heading southwards. So we go to quite a low level just there, and then we lift things up just there. Then we drop down for 3 months to that level, but in August we moved upwards again. Now, the question for September is, will that carry on moving upwards in lieu of that very active period we had at the start of the month, or will we drop back down, or will we actually just stick around where we was in August? So is it a surprise that we've had this rapid increase in sunspot numbers during the early part of September? James has been looking at weak solar cycles. We know solar cycle number 24 was a very weak solar cycle. And the same kind of thing happened, actually, and interestingly, in solar cycle number 12. This is the solar cycle we've been running very close to throughout solar cycle number 24. Solar cycle 12 ran from 1877 through to 1890, encompassing a lot of cold winters. I won't go into all of that right now, but you can see from really the trend lines how closely aligned these two solar cycles have been. So the thick green line here is solar cycle number 12 back in the 1800s. The thick red line is solar cycle number 24, which is the current solar cycle. So you see the way we went up into solar maximum very slowly after a delayed and prolonged solar minimum was really similar. Then we have a solar maximum for these two solar cycles that are very, very similar and are occurring very closely within the period of both the solar cycles. And then the way we've moved into solar minimum, we've also done that in quite a close sort of fashion as well. And you can see as we get down in towards solar minimum, and we haven't got solar minimum yet for number 24, of course, the current solar cycle, but you can see for solar cycle 12, this part just here, that is the true solar minimum of solar cycle 12, and then heading up towards solar cycle number 13, the following solar cycle. So you can see that as we move down into solar minimum, with solar cycle number 12, we did get these spikes upwards. So, for example, just here, with solar cycle number 12, we went down to no sunspots there for a whole month, just there. But by a few months on, we actually see that we go up to that sort of level. That's perhaps a year on, but go up to quite a high level of solar activity, and then quite a big drop just there down towards solar minimum, and then another spike just there, and then we do actually get a very big spike right here in what is the true solar minimum of solar cycle number 12. Now we can't say exactly that that's how number 24 is going to progress, but the fact we've had this very large spike in sunspot numbers during the first week of September, I think that is kind of like the same thing that was happening during solar cycle number 12. And if we broaden this out to other very weak solar cycles, so we've got several here, which are number 5, number 6, Dalton minimum solar cycles, of course, then number 12, which we were just looking at, number 14, number 16, and then the red one just down here, that's the current solar cycle, number 24. And you'll see that all of these solar cycles, James has already penciled in with these black lines just here where we should be looking. You can see that with all of these weak solar cycles, the movement into solar minimum, whilst we do eventually get to solar minimum, of course, we have to get to solar minimum, and we arrive in that sort of period there, but the trend down into solar minimum with these very weak solar cycles is really quite delayed and slow, and although you can't see it in terms of monthly sunspot numbers, obviously there is a lot of spikes upwards going on, particularly this one. So cycle number 26 is a really, really slow drop down into solar minimum. All the others are very closely aligned, interestingly. So all of the other solar cycles are just here, and they are very, very close. But all of them, I think, contain, we know that number 12 does, and all of the other ones, number 5, number 14, number 16, all contain spikes in sunspots late on in the solar cycles. So what's interesting about these weak solar cycles is not only are they very slow and delayed to move up towards solar maximum, and then of course get very weak solar maximums, which is what makes them very weak solar cycles, but the change back to solar minimum and into the next solar cycle, the subsequent solar cycle, which comes after solar minimum, that is also very protracted, very prolonged, very delayed, and as you move downwards you tend to get perhaps greater spikes in sunspot numbers. So maybe what happened last week, and let's just go back to that chart, so this just here, maybe what happened last week with that very, very big ramp up in sunspots in the early part of September, perhaps we should have been expecting that all the way along. Perhaps wasn't all that surprising given what's happened with solar cycle number 24 so far. Really interesting stuff, and big thank you to James sending all of that through. Right, let's try and rattle on with some more. We're going to have a look at the QBO next, quasi-biennial oscillation. Won't talk about this too much, but it's just confirming what we talked about at the end of last week's second update. So the EC-QBO is progressing. We're not going to have a QBO failure this year. Remember, the last time we was trying to get into an easterly QBO was in 2016, just here, and the QBO failed in 2016. We are not going to have that this year. We are going into an easterly QBO. You can see that just here. Very much now the easterly QBO is moving down into this sort of layer of the atmosphere where that's the boundary of the atmosphere where weather takes place. So the EC-QBO is now getting into the atmospheric level, and this will be doing something like what we see up here with this white area. That's an EC-QBO in 2009, 2010, had another EC-QBO in 2011, 2012, another EC-QBO here in 2014, 2015. That was our last EC-QBO because of a failure of the EC-QBO in 2016. So we'll be doing something like this with this chart. So 2017, 2018 is going to be an easterly QBO, and what the effects of that will be, have a lot more about that in subsequent updates. I think I've got that penciled in probably for update 5. It's going to be really interesting. You'll want to see that one. Will be interesting information about what an easterly QBO could mean for winter of 2017-2018. More on that later on in the updates. 2017 Atlantic hurricane season next. See how that's progressing, or has progressed over the past week. There hasn't been all that much change actually. So our total depressions are at 14, our total storms are at 12, our total hurricanes are at 3, and our major Category 3 or above hurricanes, I should say our total hurricanes are at 6, and our major Category 3 or above hurricanes are at 3. I don't think those numbers have changed all that much on what we saw last week, but the tropics are still alive, so we've got more storms forming all the time. We've still got Hurricane Jose here. This is from the National Hurricane Center, by the way. Still got Hurricane Jose just there. We've got Maria, just announced, Tropical Storm Maria, and also Lee just here. These might develop into hurricanes. In fact, I think the forecast for Maria, particularly, is to develop it into a major hurricane through the course of next week. So expect to see these numbers increasing when we come to do the 4th winter update, which is going to be in a couple of weeks' time. because I'll talk about this at the end of the video. Next week, got the season 1 roundup. So in a couple of weeks' time, do the 4th winter update and expect to see these numbers increasing quite a bit by the time we get through to the 4th update. As it is, so far, we have had quite a major and impactful hurricane season, and I think there's probably going to be quite a lot more of that to come. Okay, let's look at the oceans next. I'm going to deal with the Atlantic and the Pacific next. Just starting with how things were looking when we did the 2nd update last week. So 3 areas that we're interested in. We've got the North Atlantic just here. We've got the Northern Pacific up here. And then we've got the all-important ENSO region over here. So that's how things were looking when we did the 2nd update last week. Let's go to the very latest chart from NOAA, which was generated on the 14th of September. And that's how things are looking in terms of the latest sea surface temperature anomalies from NOAA. Let's deal with the Atlantic first of all. So that's the situation a week ago. This is the situation now. Very similar. And I think we are getting ever closer to a tripod, you know, because we've still got these warm waters just here through the tropical part of the Atlantic Ocean. This area just here looks like it's cooling. That's quite an important area to get it to go cool. That looks like it's cooling down. And then this area was having a little bit of blue just here. I don't think that's all that substantial. Overall, this area looks quite warm. And I don't think, looking at that, we are all that far from a tripod. A tripod is what we're looking for to get a negative NAO in the winter. So let's just get those away again. See what we think. Do you think we are heading increasingly towards a tripod? What do you think? I think we are edging that way quite quickly, actually. We are moving in that sort of direction. What we're going to see is whether this area cools down anymore. We don't want these cold splotches just here to get any bigger. We want this area to stay warm to the south of Greenland. We want to keep this area through the tropics quite warm as well. But overall, I don't think we're all that far from a tripod there, particularly in comparison to what was going on last week. And now, have a look at the northern part of the Pacific Ocean next. So we've got cold sea surface temperature anomalies beginning to develop up towards Alaska. That's quite interesting as well. Let's go back to last week. That's how things were looking up in the northern Pacific Ocean last week. That's how things are looking now. That cold area has deepened, and I think it's expanded a little bit. We want to get rid of all of this warm water just here, and essentially we want, for a cold winter, we want all of this to be looking quite cold in a horseshoe shape. So that, again, getting quite interesting there. And then in terms of the ENSO region, so it looks like we are very much going towards La Nina, and that's what we're going to focus on for the rest of this video, what's happening in the ENSO region. So we've got these cold, we have these cold sea surface temperature anomalies through the Equatorial Pacific. ENSO region, of course, is from Peru over here to Indonesia over here. We've got these cold waters along the Equatorial Pacific. We had them last week. We've still got them this week. I think they may have intensified a little bit over towards the eastern part of the Equatorial Pacific, probably roughly about the same through this central area. We aren't at La Nina yet. We aren't having a cold event yet because the anomalies don't go down to a low enough temperature. They haven't sustained that low enough temperature over 5 tri-monthly periods. So to get a La Nina designated, you have to meet strict criteria. But certainly in terms of what we see here with these cold and average sea surface temperature anomalies through the Equatorial Pacific, it doesn't look like we're all that far away from a cold event signal. This is at in the subsurface, underneath the surface of the Equatorial Pacific Ocean. You can see that the subsurface temperature anomalies are also looking quite cold now. They are cooling increasingly. So a depth of around 100 to 150 meters down, it looks like we're going down to subsurface temperature anomalies of around 2 to 4 degrees below average. So quite significantly colder than average subsurface temperature anomalies underneath the surface of the Pacific Ocean. That could well be impactful as we get further on towards winter. We might see these sea surface temperature lines that we have here going even colder than they are right now. The modelling is very much shifting towards a La Nina, doing it quite quickly. So this is what the CFS V2 is now seeing for the central equatorial Pacific. And we've got the anomalies on the side and the dates are along the bottom. And we can see that we are moving very much now into moderate, yes, that's moderate, La Nina, cold event territory, going down to -1.5. This will be a more intense La Nina than we had last winter in 2016-17. Sorry about that. That was a very weak La Nina that we had last winter. Almost didn't get designated. This would be a proper La Nina. This would be a proper cold event. No getting away from it. Would be a moderate La Nina cold event. And a huge change on what happened. What was expected to happen a few months ago. So this is the forecast from CFS V2 back in June, where you can see it was expecting to be around ENSO neutral on the warmer side, almost on a borderline El Nino being from there upwards, of course. So almost on a borderline El Nino was the forecast from CFS V2 back in June. And now we have flipped that and we are going for a moderate La Nina, or the model is going for a moderate La Nina. Same story for Jamstech. Doesn't quite get to a moderate La Nina, but it is now very much going for ENSO neutral on the cold side at the very least, possibly even a weak La Nina. So again, dates on the bottom, temperature anomalies on the side, and you see from the red line here, that's the ensemble mean, that the model is very much on a par with just a weak La Nina, borderline ENSO neutral on the cold side to weak La Nina. That again, a huge change on what it was predicting at the start of the summer. We was expecting a moderate El Nina, a moderate warm event. So not only have we seen a collapse of El Nino during this summer, we have actually flipped into a cold event. This is very, very unusual stuff. I'm going to say why this is important for winter updates in a moment, of the winter forecast, because this is really, really unusual. ECMWF now is also going for a cold event. It's going for a La Nina. Look at this. We've got the, again, temperature anomalies along the side. The dates are along the bottom. This is the final quarter of 2017 just here, by which time you can see that the majority of runs, well, we've got the warmest ensemble plume members up here, which are at ENSO neutral on the cold side, and the coldest are down here, which are sort of moderate moderate La Nina cold event levels. But sort of the mean part of the plume is going to be just here, and that is going into La Nina territory, probably weak La Nina. I don't think this model is going quite as far as the CFS V2 in predicting a moderate La Nina, but it is definitely predicting a La Nina to be in place for the final quarter of 2017. As I say, whether this will ever get designated is the big unknown, because it has to stretch out over 5 tri-monthly periods, which we might not do on what the ECMWF is showing. We would do it, though, on what the CFS is showing. That would definitely be a designated La Nina. Whether we would do it with the ECM, it's not certain. But the ECM is moving. This is the point about this, because, again, this goes back to June, where you can see in June the ECM was forecasting an El Nino event to be taking place. So we've got the temperature anomalies on the side, dates are on the bottom, and you can see we only had a few outlier members in June that were going anywhere down to the depths of where we are going to be for this year, in this sort of area just here, which is just sort of borderline ENSO neutral to weak La Nina. Only a few outliers were doing that. Most of the ensemble plume members were up here and going for a weak El Nino event. So the ECM, with all the other models, is playing catch-up with this. And it's important for 2 reasons. One, the models are clearly struggling a lot in terms of where ENSO is going, and that means they're going to be playing catch-up. So we're going to do the first season model roundup for the winter 2017-18 next week, and that's going to have a huge health warning with it. I can tell you that now, because these models are playing catch-up, and this will be important to remember later on today when we release the ECMWF seasonal interpretation for the winter. That'll be this afternoon. When you watch that, keep in mind that this model just 3 months ago was going for an El Nino event. Now it's going for a La Nina, or gets very, very close to a La Nina anyway. So a very dramatic flip has taken place, which means that the models are going to be trying to play catch up on what these events in the Pacific Ocean could mean. So that's point number one. Point number two about this is that it's very, very unusual to have such a dramatic change from the start of summer to the end of the summer. Only very few examples that I can think of where anything like this happened. The main one will probably be 2012, when it looked like we were going to have an El Nino through the autumn of 2012. And it collapsed back to ENSO neutral. But even that wasn't as dramatic as what we're seeing here, because what we're seeing here is very much now looking like we're going into La Nina territory. So we've got to think about what this could mean, and we're going to finish off with some analogues. So what we're going to look at for today's analogues are years that are going from La Nina at the start of the year to ENSO neutral, because it's not totally out of the question that we won't be at ENSO neutral for the winter. We may still just about hang on to ENSO neutral, albeit on the cooler side. So our first package of analogues will be years that begin at the beginning of the year with La Nina, then go to ENSO neutral by the following winter. And then the second analogues package will be ENSO neutral to La Nina. That's probably more like what these models are suggesting is going to happen. All of these analogue scores coming from James, so big thank you again to James for supplying them to me for this third update. So we begin with the year 1896 here. This is our first La Nina to ENSO neutral. So this winter, 1895-1896 was an ENSO neutral winter, but it follows on from a La Nina event. This one has a big ridge out to the west of the UK, with the jet stream up here doing something like that. So overall, probably fairly dry and quite a mild winter in 1895-1896. Our next winter is 1917-1918. Again, remember this is going from La Nina to ENSO neutral. This one, let's change the colour. This one has blocking to the south of Greenland and low pressure up here. So almost a cold winter, but not quite putting off, but it did have some pretty decent cold snaps, especially associated with January 1918. Then a really long gap to 1997. So this is winter of 1996-1997. Very strange winter, this one. So it has a lot of anticyclonic influences. You're probably looking about and thinking it's a very mild winter. Actually, it was pretty cold through the early part of the winter. It's kind of like a front-loaded winter from a cold perspective. I mean, later on, it turned mild, so that's why the reanalysis looks like that. But early in the winter, the high pressure was centred over Scandinavia, and then by February, we actually turned very mild and zonal in 1997. 2002 is our next winter that's going from sort of landing in the previous winter to ENSO neutral for the winter of 2001-2002. This one is a mild winter. It has above average heights to the south. I think we have got a bit of a trend here for quite dryish winters, by the way. So we're doing something a little bit like that with the jet stream. Not a particularly exciting winter, to say the least. That one started off pretty dry and cold, but it turned wet and zonal through January and February. And then 2012-2013 shows up. I won't say too much about that, because I'm sure it's quite fresh in the memory, but that one was a cold winter. We had above average heights to the north, below average heights, let's change the colour again, centering to the southeast. And doing something a little bit like that with the flow and with the jet stream. Of course, that got very cold at the end of the winter, with a severely cold March in 2013. We combine all of those years. This is what we come out with. So this is combining 1896, 1918, 1997, 2002, 2013. And we have a big area of above average heights to the west, somewhere to the west of the country, quite close to Greenland. below average heights up to the northeast and down there. So almost a cold winter pattern, but we did see there that there are several winters that were quite mild. Not many winters to go at, by the way, but are going from La Nina to ENSO neutral in that fashion. The next package of winters is, this one perhaps a little bit more like what the models are suggesting, which is ENSO neutral to La Nina. So these are La Nina winters following on from a period of ENSO neutral. There aren't many of these either. Generally, when you get a La Nina, you will do it after an El Nino. So if we was looking at Nino to Nina, warm to cold winters, there will be many more examples. Very unusual what is going on at the moment. That's something else to factor in when we come to do the winter forecast. It's going to be another, how many times do we say this? It's going to be another winter forecast. It's going to be very, very difficult to predict. Now, the winter is very difficult to predict with the winter forecast, purely because what's going on again with ENSO, very unusual. So our first analogue year, winter, that is an La Nina winter, following on from ENSO neutral, of that of 1880. So this is 1879, 1880. This is quite a cold winter with high pressure close to the country blocking feature. Was as cold as the winter before, 1878, 1879, which was a severe winter, but it was a pretty cold winter, especially early on in December 1879. Also quite a dry winter as well. 1908, 1909 is our next winter. This is another cold one. This is a bit of a forgotten winter, but this was generally cold, 1908, 1909. You see a reason why. We have an anomalous blocking feature across Scandinavia. We've got a negative NAO with lots of low pressure to the south, and we bring in the wind from the east. January. That was a pretty cold winter. There weren't many of them before 1940. From 1900 to 1940, most of the winters, not all of them, but most of them were mild. There weren't many cold winters, but that was one, 1908, 1909. 1933, 1934 is our next winter. This one just very, very dry and very anticyclonic. It was pretty cold in December 1933, but the main thing is that it was very dry winter. Our next winter is 1945, 1946. This looks like it could be quite a coldish winter. I don't know much about this winter because it precludes or precedes the severe winter of 1947. So that's where all the focus is, of course, on 46, 47. For 45, 46, might be one of those winters that is trying to get cold, but not quite doing it. It looks like there would, at the very least, have been some cold snaps, because we have got above average heights to the north. We've got below average heights seemingly running through here. So I assume it's quite an unsettled winter, and I assume there would have been some cold snaps. Maybe one of those winters, and 61, 62 was similar, where we kind of like maybe set the scene a little bit for what's going to happen the following winter, but we don't go anywhere near the severity of the following winter. But I think that one probably would have had some colder snaps in it. Then we go through to 49, 50. This is just a straightforward mild winter. We've got low pressure out to west. We bring the westerlies in like that. So that's a straightforward mild La Nina winter following on from ENSO neutral. And then our last year is 1967, 1968. I think this one showed up in the analogues that we looked at either last week or the week before. This one has blocking out to the west, quite a deep trough to the east, and pulling down some cold snaps at times. Again, it's not remembered as one of the coldest winters of the 1960s, but there was quite a bit of cold weather in there. Certainly plenty of cold snaps through the early part of 1968. Combining all these years, and again, there aren't all that many of them, because again, I have to emphasize what we're doing. If we do go to La Nina, following on from this period of ENSO neutral, and a collapse in the summer of El Nino, possible El Nino, we do get that, but it is very, very unusual. But combining these winters, 1880, 1909, 1934, 1946, 1950, 1968. We finish up with this sort of pattern. Again, it is similar in some ways to the last analogues package we were just looking at, those La Nina to neutral winters, in that it's close to a cold winter signal, but maybe not quite getting there. But we can see, or we have seen, that there were several cold winters within those two analogues package. We'll have more on this next week, because we're going to look at ENSO neutral winters for next week, and I'll talk more about that for next week's update, because it's going to be a little bit more complicated than what we focused on for this update. And that's it. So that's the third update in the can. We've gone to nearly 45 minutes. Hope you found it interesting and informative. I've done this all in one take. I haven't had to stop, have a drink of water either. I don't think I've even coughed during this third update, which is quite unusual for me. If you watch the videos regularly, you will know that I do tend to have a little bit of tickle in my throat. I've not had that for this third update, so quite pleased with myself getting this done all in one take. Hope you found it interesting and informative. Loads to digest here, certainly from the ENSO perspective. I think what we do take from this is that we are, again, seems to be something that we say very regularly at the moment when we do these winter updates. I'm not quite sure why the reason is, but it seems that from an ENSO perspective, we are in very unique territory again, as we have been very regularly when we've done these updates. Right way back to the first one, actually, in 2012, 2013. Even that was unusual, what happened there from an ENSO perspective. Alright, so that's it for the third update. This will be placed on the winter updates and forecast page later on today, with an extensive written report going through everything that we've discussed. Later on this afternoon, probably around 2 or 3 o'clock, the ECNUF seasonal model interpretation will be released. That's covering winter period as well, so really exclusive content for GWV with that one. As I say, this is going to be placed on the winter updates page later on today. And next week, just better tell you a little bit about this. So next week, we leave off the winter updates, because we're going to get the models together for the first time this season. We're going to get all the long-range models together that we can, see what they're all showing for the winter of 2017-2018. However, we will do a little mini winter update on the blog. So there'll be a little written mini update, just looking at things like solar activity and Siberian snow cover, just to see how things have progressed, probably hurricane activity in the past week. But the next video winter update, so the next winter update video, the fourth one, that'll be released in 2 weeks' time, which I think is going to be Sunday the 1st of October. Might be wrong about that. I'm going to check my diary. But anyway, it'll be the first, be 2 weeks away, first Sunday of October. Alright, at nearly 47 minutes, that's all for now, and thanks for watching.